The loss of Robin Gibb, a voice that defined generations, was lamented by the world in 2012. However, few people fully comprehended the story that lay behind the glitz of disco fame and record-breaking triumph. Everyone was startled to learn about Robin Gibb's unfortunate reality. Sayo, fortunate reality. A lifetime filled with breathtaking peaks, heartbreaking valleys, and mysteries that persisted long after his last note. The Bee Gees career was anything from typical, from the soaring heights of Saturday Night Fever to the private fights that rocked his existence. Which unspoken hardships plagued the musician? And why did his passing leave a hole that could never be filled by harmony? The generation's voice. A musical legacy began on the Isle of Man on December 22, 1949. Just 35 minutes before his twin brother Morris was born, Rob and Hugh Gibb were born, starting a relationship that would forever influence modern music. Yang. The Gibbs home was filled with music from the beginning, laying the groundwork for one of the most amazing legacies in popular music history. Robin's mother, Barbara, a former singer, and father Hugh, a drummer and band leader, made sure that music was as essential to their children's development as breathing. At a startlingly young age, the twins and their older brother, Barry, found their innate talent for harmony. The Gibb brothers were already writing original songs and taught themselves to play instruments, while the majority of kids were learning nursery rhymes. Even during these early years, Robin's voice had a unique quality, a quivering vibrato that held emotional weight well beyond his years. This unique, tremulous quality later became instantly recognized to millions of admirers worldwide. The family lived humbly, first on the Isle of Man, and then in Manchester, England, where they went in pursuit of better possibilities. But what would really put the brothers on their way to musical stardom was their audacious choice to immigrate to Australia in 1958. The adolescent Gibb started playing wherever they could in Brisbane's sun-drenched suburbs. Regional speedways, talent competitions, and brief TV appearances. Although some say it was derived from the initials of Australian promoters Bill Good and Bill Gates, the Bee Gees are commonly thought to have referenced the brothers Gibb. They performed between races at the Redcliffe Speedway to collect pocket money for their first permanent engagement. Even at the age of 12, Robin was already showcasing the distinctive singing style that would eventually earn him a worldwide celebrity. Barry frequently took the lead vocals, but Robin's unique counterpoint was what made their harmonies eerily memorable. The brothers' commitment to their craft was unwavering. They would get together every day after school to work on their three-part harmonies and write songs. The Battle of the Blue and the Gray, their debut single, was released in 1963, marking the modest start of their Australian career. With Wine and Women, they earned their first chart triumph by 1965. Throughout this time, Robin was growing as a songwriter as well as a performer, adding more complex songs to the group's repertoire. Robin's vocal frequently supplied the strong emotional counterpoint that would come to define the brothers' sound as they spent endless hours honing their harmonies. His tremulous, fragile delivery of his first major lead vocal, "I Started a Joke," brilliantly encapsulated the sorrowful atmosphere of the song. But Australia, despite its beauty and the chances it had brought, began to feel confining for the ambitious brothers. By 1966, recognizing that their skills merited a broader stage, they took the courageous choice to return to England. Determined to leave their impact on the far more expansive British music industry, they boarded a ship to return to the United Kingdom with their parents' approval. Neither of them could have predicted the terrible depths that lay ahead or the incredible heights they would achieve. Harmonious brothers. When the Gibb brothers first arrived in Southampton in early 1967, the British music scene was dominated by the Beatles' revolution's aftermath. Yet within months, their unique music established its own particular niche, and Robin played a significant role in this achievement. Their lives were altered by a chance encounter that happened at the same time they arrived in London. After listening to their demo tape, Robert Stigwood, a driven young music entrepreneur, saw their potential right away. He got them a recording deal with Polydor Records and signed them to his management firm. With their first worldwide smash, New York mining disaster 1941, Robin's eerie lead vocals gave them a sound so unique that many people thought they were the Beatles at first. There was nothing wrong with this comparison. They were thrust into the public eye. The events that followed were truly amazing. Massachusetts, featuring Robin's lead vocals, went to #1 in the UK and across Europe. I've got to get a message to you, and I started a joke followed. Each one, which included Robin's unique vibe, became inextricably linked to him. His developing artistic individuality is reflected in its complex melody and intellectual words. Robin's own identity started to take shape at this time. Robin's VO was what gave the group's early successes its unique flavor, even though Barry's falsetto would eventually come to define the disco era. Maya's contributions to songwriting became more refined over time, frequently delving into deeper, more intricate subjects than the usual pop fare. However, the unexpected success came with its own set of demands, pressures that would soon cause Robin's apparently idyllic life to show its first cracks. The 19-year-old started to feel the effects of the demanding pace of traveling, recording, and promotion. What fans couldn't see behind the hit albums and television appearances was a young man grappling with the expectations of unexpected success. Tensions among the Bee Gees had increased considerably by 1969. Robin was starting to feel the weight of the once close-knit group's artistic disagreements and personal difficulties. In terms of songwriting impact and vocal prominence, Robin felt more and more eclipsed by his brothers Barry and Morris as the band's sound changed. He felt a little marginalized by this change, as though his contributions were being lessened. Furthermore, Robin became dissatisfied with the group's musical direction, believing it was departing from the sound he was most enthusiastic about. After much introspection, Robin made the tough and unexpected decision to leave the Bees when these growing demands reached a breaking point. He was resolved to pursue his own path and prove himself as a solo artist, keen to explore new musical concepts and restore creative control over his work. This was a significant turning moment for Robin's life and the Bee Gees' destiny. His unique voice was able to stand alone when his debut solo single, Saved by the Bell, peaked at #2 in the UK charts. His subsequent solo album, Robin's Reign, demonstrated his breadth and depth as an artist. But even with this early success, something remained lacking. His brothers and he had a mystical chemistry. Despite being brief, this time apart demonstrated the brothers' unquestionable vocal power as well as the strength of Robin's distinct talent. By 1970, the allure of fraternal unity outweighed personal aspirations. The brothers' reconciliation and reunion laid the groundwork for the decade that would prove to be their most remarkable. They started to push boundaries and add new influences to their sound, which would eventually lead to their next major change. But even with this reunion, Robin was still affected by the encounter. The event had exposed his artistic nature, his sensitivity, and, perhaps most significantly, a fragility that would follow him for the rest of his life, portending terrible hardships to come. Rebirth and reinvention. The early 1970s were a period of transition for the Bee Gees. They found it difficult to regain their previous level of success after their reunion. Despite being well reviewed by critics, their albums did not produce the #1 singles of their heyday in the late 1960s. They found themselves at a creative and business turning point by 1974. Robin's fortitude would be essential to the group's survival during this uncertain time. In spite of his professional difficulties, he was content with his first wife, Molly Hulleys, who worked as a secretary for Robert Stigwood's company. After getting married in 1968, they had 2 kids, Melissa and Spencer. During the tough years for the organization, this steadiness gave Robin a sense of emotional stability. The brothers' decision to reimagine their sound marked a sea change. They started working with producer Arif Martin after temporarily relocating to Miami, and he urged them to experiment with a more rhythm-driven style. The outcome was their main course album from 1975, which included the breakout single, Gibb, Talking. This marked a significant change in their sound, becoming more dance-oriented and redefining their career. Robin's position within the organization also changed as a result of this transition. Robin modified his characteristic voice to fit their new direction, while Barry's falsetto gained prominence. His contributions continued to be crucial, offering emotional resonance and depth that counterbalanced the group's growing emphasis on rhythm. Vote Luda. However, their contribution to the 1977 Saturday Night Fever soundtrack would solidify their legacy in the music industry. Robert Stigwood, the film's producer, asked the BG to provide a few songs for a film about Brooklyn's disco scene. Film brothers, surprisingly, penned most of their contributions in a single weekend. The resulting soundtrack became an unprecedented cultural phenomenon. It won several Grammys, sold over 40 million copies worldwide, and topped the charts for months. And songs like How Deep Is Your Love and More Than a Woman, Robin's vocals were essential because they gave the disco beats more nuance and emotional depth. For a time, it seemed like Robin had found both personal and professional fulfillment. Bijaz were involved in more than simply the disco movement. They were contributing to its definition. Their accomplishments during this time period were astounding. Record-breaking album sales, numerous Grammy Awards, and 6 consecutive #1 singles. Writing, producing, and recording 6 consecutive #1 hits made them the only group in music history to do it. But behind the scenes, Robin was battling the strains of stardom while enjoying its dizzying heights. The brothers were producing and writing songs for other artists, including Dionne Warwick, Kenny Rogers, and Barbra Streisand, in addition to themselves. Robin, who has always been a perfectionist, was under a lot of stress due to the heavy job. Robin's personal life and health started to suffer as a result of the pressures of touring, recording, and public appearances. Tensions at home arose from his extended absences from his family. Under the constant burden of international celebrity, his marriage to Molly started to show indications of strain. Few admirers, however, got a peek of these personal challenges. The public witnessed a self-assured artist at the top of his game, contributing to some of the most memorable music of the time. The bright facade of disco stardom concealed the sad truth that would finally stun everyone. However, the fissures were starting to appear. The shadow of achievement. While the Bee Gees topped charts worldwide and Staying Alive performed in discos all over the world, Robin Gibb was leading a double life that few fans ever realized. One of the most startling parts of his legacy would finally emerge from the agonizing truth that lay behind the bright lights and admiring audiences. Because of his sensitivity, which made him such an engaging artist, Robin was also susceptible to the demands of celebrity. He had started to struggle with amphetamine usage as early as the late 1960s, during the group's first era of success. This reliance would reappear throughout his life during stressful times. Once a pillar of support, his marriage to Molly Holly started to fall apart under the strain of his celebrity. Unbridgeable distances were formed by the protracted separations, the continuous travel, and the extreme pressures of stardom. After 12 years of marriage, they got divorced in 1980. Despite these personal hardships, Robin remained almost compulsively committed to his work. His perfectionism was legendary in the studio. To get the ideal take, he would spend hours perfecting vocal portions, frequently exhausting both himself and others in the process. His physical and emotional well-being suffered as a result of this unrelenting effort, which also generated amazing music. During this chaotic time, his relationship with his twin, Morris, remained the most stable. This relationship extended beyond music. They helped one another through their personal hardships, with Morris supporting Robin during his most difficult times. The disco reaction in the early 1980s dealt yet another catastrophic blow. The genre that had given them unheard-of popularity turned into a liability almost immediately. Their music was banned by radio stations, and LP sales plummeted. Once seemingly invincible, the brothers now had to adjust to a constantly evolving musical scene. In response, Robin delved further into solo work, releasing How Old Are You in 1983, which resulted in Boys Do Fall in Love, a successful single. During this time, he was personally happy with Dwena Murphy, his second wife, a Druid priestess and artist whom he married in 1985. Their bond, characterized by a love of the arts and history, gave his life a new sense of security. Unsaid anxieties. The Bee Gees underwent a phase of reinvention in the 1990s. A change in popular opinion was indicated by the critical reevaluation of their history. which culminated in their 1997 induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They were finally acknowledged as great songwriters whose influence lasted for decades, rather than being written off as ordinary disco sensations. With customary zeal, Robin embraced this rebirth. He appeared to have struck a balance between his personal life and his musical career now that he was in his 40s. Stability came with his marriage to Dwina, and he found new meaning in life after the birth of their son, Robin John, in 1983. They settled in a restored 12th century abbey in Oxfordshire, where Robin created a state-of-the-art recording studio. During this time, his dedication to humanitarian efforts and environmental causes took center stage in his public life. By leveraging his position to spread awareness of climate change, Robin became into a fervent supporter of wildlife conservation and green energy there. He presided over the International Federation of Festival Organizations, which promoted musical exchanges across cultures. Along with his brothers, he received a CBE in 2002 in recognition of their humanitarian efforts in addition to their musical accomplishments. However, underneath this ostensibly perfect life were hidden anxieties that Robin mostly kept to himself. His thoughts were plagued by a lengthy dark shadow of loss and unspoken suffering due to the Gibb family's medical history. Andy, his youngest brother, passed away tragically in 1988 at the age of 30. Andy had established a prosperous solo career in the late 1970s. Myocarditis, an inflammation of the heart muscle brought on by a viral infection, was officially cited as the cause of his death. However, Andy's heart had been badly damaged by years of cocaine consumption, leaving a lingering reminder of the inner evils that tormented the family. A few years later, in 1992, their father Hugh died, which made Robin's sadness much more burdensome. Robin became vividly aware of his own mortality as well as the precarious equilibrium between achievement, celebrity, and the internal conflicts within the family as a result of these personal tragedies. The gastric problems that had started to plague him intermittently were more worrisome. These symptoms prompted private anxiety because digestive issues ran in his family. However, instead of focusing on these anxieties, Robin, as is his custom, directed his energies toward his work. During this time, he discovered new ways to express his artistic side. The Titanic Requiem, an ambitious project that combined classical compositions with modern elements, was one of the classical pieces he and his son Robin John worked on. Even after decades in the business, he was always prepared to push limits and discover new musical horizons, as evidenced by this late career exploration. But behind closed doors, it was getting harder to ignore Robin's health issues. By the early 2000s, he was dealing with recurrent digestive issues and stomach pain. He sought medical advice, but he was hesitant to have intrusive treatments or long hospital stints that might interfere with his artistic endeavors. This hesitation will shortly turn out to have disastrous results. However, the family suffered yet another devastating setback prior to Robin's personal health problem. Morris, Robin's twin brother, was sent to a Miami hospital in January 2003 due to excruciating stomach pain brought on by a twisted intestine. Morris underwent emergency surgery, but difficulties increased, and during a second procedure, he had a deadly heart attack. He was just 53. Robin's world fell apart when Morris passed away unexpectedly. This was the loss of a lifelong companion in addition to a brother. He had shared a womb, innumerable memories, and an incredible musical journey with the twin. There had always been more than just a brotherly bond between them. The intimacy was almost otherworldly. Following this devastating loss, Robin was burdened by a deep emptiness. The BG to us were the three brothers. Without the three of us, it's something else. We were a group because we were brothers, he said, stating that the BG could no longer be the same. The nature of the medical condition that claimed Morris's life, intestinal blockage, made it even more traumatic for Robin. In light of his own history of digestive problems, Morika's passing made him face the possibility that he might be just as vulnerable. In spite of his grief and personal anxieties, Robin continued to make music, recording solo songs and working with other musicians. On the surface, he seemed to be making progress in his career. However, Those closest to him saw changes, periods of reflection, a renewed sense of urgency to finish the projects that meant the most to him, and an intensified work ethic, as if he were racing against some invisible clock. The unsaid fears that had plagued Robin for years were gradually emerging from the shadows into the light, laying the groundwork for the last shocking chapter of his extraordinary life, his history repeating itself. The terrible truth about Robin Gibb, which had been hidden for years, finally came to light in 2010. He was on tour in Belgium when he suffered from excruciating stomach pain that prevented him from performing. He was rushed to a hospital in Oxford, where medical professionals found that he had a blocked intestine, the same condition that had killed his twin brother Morris 7 years prior. The discovery sent shockwaves through Robin's family and close friends, and life seemed to be repeating itself in the most literal and cruel way. Emergency surgery saved Robin's life, but it was impossible to ignore the parallels to Morica's final illness. Robin approached his recovery with characteristic determination. In just a few weeks, he was back in his studio working on new projects, such as the Titanic Requiem with his son, Yai. He presented a resilient and hopeful image to the public, downplaying the severity of his condition in interviews and instead concentrating on his next creative endeavors. But in private, the experience had deeply shaken him. By April 2011, Robin was unable to ignore the signs that something was seriously wrong, as the surgery had not only revealed a blocked intestine, but also possibly more serious underlying issues. The doctors recommended regular monitoring and additional tests, which Robin, who was always reluctant to dwell on health issues, did not always heed as diligently as his family wished. Though he was diagnosed with colon cancer, which had already spread to his liver, after extensive testing due to persistent abdominal pain and digestive problems. The news was devastating, but not totally unexpected to Robin because there had been too many warning signs and too many similarities with Morris's health issues. He started aggressive treatment, including 7 rounds of chemotherapy, but at first, Robin and his family chose to keep the diagnosis a secret. The terrible truth that would shock his fans around the world was that Robin had been fighting not just cancer, but also a sense of inevitable destiny, a feeling that he might share the same fate as his twin. So, during this difficult process, Robin kept up an active schedule whenever his strength allowed, even appearing in public on a few occasions. In October 2011, he was taken to the hospital due to severe abdominal pain, and it was determined that he had an inflamed colon, another complication associated with his declining health. But as his physical condition deteriorated, he remained steadfast in his resolve to finish his artistic endeavors, especially the Titanic Requiem. By January 2012, it was impossible to ignore the rumors that Robin was ill, and he finally admitted to having cancer in an interview with the Mail on Sunday, looking thin and weak in infrequent public appearances. In what would be one of his last interviews, he stated, "I sometimes wonder if all the tragedies my family has suffered, like Andy and Morris dying so young and everything that's happened to me recently, is a kind of karmic price we are paying for all the fame and fortune we've had." Fans who were not aware of the seriousness of his health were taken aback by this open admission. The same medical demons that had taken his twin brother's life were battling for the life of the man whose voice had soared on some of the most uplifting tunes in popular music. Robin made what would be his last public appearance at the London Palladium Soldiers charity concert in February 2012. He was given a standing ovation despite his obvious weakness. But for a guy who had dedicated his life to performance, it was a moving final moment in the spotlight. He had pneumonia in March and went into a coma, though he briefly regained consciousness in late April. What his family characterized as a stunning recovery that surpassed his doctor's predictions, it proved to be only a momentary reprieve. On May 20th, 2012, Robin Gibb passed suddenly, surrounded by his family at a London hospital. He was only 62 years old. The unexpected revelation. When Robin Gibb went away, the world mourned the loss of a renowned voice. But what many admirers didn't first comprehend was the full scope of the genetic tragedy that had taken him. A startling realization that would only fully surface after his passing. Following Robin's death, medical reports were made public, providing a complex picture of his last illness. Although the main diagnoses made public during his lifetime were liver and colon cancer, physicians also disclosed that Robin had a congenital intestinal ailment that was comparable to the one that killed his twin brother Morris 9 years prior. For decades, Robin had struggled with this inherited susceptibility to digestive issues, although he had mostly kept his troubles to himself. The 2010 case of the twisted intestine that required emergency surgery was not unique. Throughout his adult life, Robin had had sporadic symptoms, but he had frequently ignored them in favor of his music. Everyone was stunned to learn that Robin's death was part of a horrible pattern in the Gibb family's medical history, one that had also killed his twin brother, Morris, from similar circumstances and at almost the same age. Almost the same age. Although he passed away at the age of 30 from heart inflammation, their younger brother, Andy, had intestinal problems all of his brief life. Subsequently, family members disclosed that Robin had been troubled by Morris's passing, occasionally expressing the conviction that whatever had taken his twin might also take him. Sprian. His approach to his own health had been shaped by this premonition, which resulted in a complicated psychological link between his symptoms and his fatalistic acceptance and denial. The Bee Gees story took on a Greek tragedy when it was revealed that Robin's death was caused by this genetic component. Three gifted brothers who had taken the world by storm with their harmonies were all brought down by comparable illnesses. Barry was the only one of the three brothers who had been the BGS nucleus. How do you feel about Robin's will to continue making music despite his impending death? Has your opinion of his contributions to the Bee Gees changed in light of his hereditary health issues? Leave a comment below with your opinions.